All right, can everyone hear me? We good? All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for attending the 2021 Student Government Board Presidential Debate. My name is Benjamin Page of the Political Science Student Association, and I will be one of our moderators for this evening.
And I'm Darren Campuzano of WPTS Radio. I'll be your other moderator this evening. Tonight, you're going to hear opening statements from each slate and independent candidate, as well as a debate from our three presidential candidates. We're going to start by having each individual candidate and slate introduce themselves for 90 seconds.
Before we hear from the candidates, we'd like to say that questions will be open to the audience at the end of the presidential debate. And if you'd like to pose a question, just put it into the Q&A feature on Zoom. Let's hear from the candidates.
So we'll begin with the Betterment slate.
Hi guys, my name is Jack Rotolo and I'm running with Brennan Conway on the Betterment slate for the Student Government Board. Now you won't hear from us much more tonight because we're both board candidates and this is for presidential candidates, but we want to introduce ourselves and we want to make Pitt better and we believe we can do better, and that's what our slate is imagining. And the central focus of our slate is that it's on the Pitt student. The Pitt student is not just a member of one class or another class or a member of this club or another club. The Pitt student is all of us, all 20,000 undergraduates. And I want to give it over to Brennan now to introduce himself.
Yep, so my name is Brennan. I'm a junior econ poli-sci major. And like Jack said, we are the Betterment slate. And we think we can make Pitt better with our platform. And what makes our platform unique is we have real achievable proposals with concrete solutions. So just to quickly run through them, we want to create an ad hoc committee to review the Flex at Pitt model, which any undergraduate student can join. We want to urge the university to sign the Chicago Statement on Free Speech to protect our right to speak on campus. And finally, we want to update the allocations manual to improve transparency and allow clubs to have better access to the funds they deserve. So with that, we hope that you'll vote for Betterment next Tuesday so we can make Pitt better together. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Betterment. Now let's hear from Vision.
All right. Hello, friends and distinguished guests. My name is Joe Lansdell. I've been an RA here on campus for the past 2 years, listening to and learning from a diverse group of students. Now I'm running for student government president in order to help address a number of recurring issues here on campus and to listen to the students. I'm going to turn it over to Jesse.
Hi guys, I'm Jessie. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a junior engineering student focusing on mental health issues of our students.
Hi, I'm Nadine. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a junior. I've been an RA for a year and I'm majoring in emergency medicine and I am focusing on financial wellness.
Hi, my name is Dan Rudy, pronouns he, him, his. I'm a fourth year student here majoring in math, computer science, and economics. And I'm running to keep listening to students next year and fighting for their needs.
All right, we'll move on to the independent candidate, Daniel Temelow.
Hey y'all, my name is Daniel. I'm a first year political science and public and professional writing double major. I'm originally from Massachusetts. I'm running for student government board primarily to provide a voice to the class of 2024 and the class 2025, the incoming class. A lot of people that are running for student government are typically sophomores and juniors who will be juniors and seniors on the board. And I want to be able to give other classes a voice at this moment. I want to provide a different perspective. I'm a first year who has never attended an in-person class at Pitt. And I want to be able to make sure that the people who have lived those same experiences as me and those people that have not stepped foot on Pitt's campus yet, I want to make life as easy as possible for them. my campaign, were stress and communication between every student. My goals, I want to visit every residence hall next year and get people to tell me their concerns so I can act on them. A lot of my other platform issues are things that I'm sure other candidates have as well. Independent bank accounts for clubs, encouraging Pitt once again to divest immediately from fossil fuels, and many other things, increased voter registration among them. So I'm really hopeful that you all can find me a place for me on your ballot, and it would be an honor to serve on your student government board. Thank you all. Have a good night.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Now let's hear from another one of our independent candidates, Arshitha Rahman.
Hi everyone, my name is Hashita. I'm a sophomore neuroscience major on the pre-med track. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the Vice President of Programming for Resident Student Association. I'm also an RA in the Quad and the President of Pitt Association for the Blind. Today I'm speaking to you as a presidential candidate because I hope to further improve our amazing school and make it a place that every student is proud to call home. In order to do this, I have 3 broad focuses that I believe will accommodate the needs and wants of all students. I hope to create transparency between faculty and students in regards to finances and growing flex at Pitt, even in the post-pandemic world. I want to create a strengthened community with the 400+ organizations we have on campus that are extremely disconnected from SGB currently. I have to create a channel where there is a constant connection between these organizations and SGB. And my third focus, but not my last, is to ensure student services, particularly emergency services, are properly catered to students. This is a small glimpse on what I hope to achieve if I were elected president, but please feel free to reach out to me at any time to learn more about what I hope to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Harshitha. We'll move on to the bright side slate.
Hey everyone, together we are running on the Bright Side slate. We sort of came up with the name Bright Side because we recognize the need for positivity going into the future, both for us as students, but also as an institution as a whole. We know the pandemic has challenged us in ways we never could have imagined, but as a slate, we are optimistic for the future. Having witnessed the incredible resilience and strength of our community, we know Pitt's going to get through this pandemic. And so we think it's about time to look to the bright side. And we hope you'll join us in seeing this vision through together. That being said, my name is Tyler. I'm a junior pursuing a dual degree in Dietrich in the Business School in Politics and Philosophy and Finance. This year I'm running for president. My 4 main areas are promoting civic engagement, promoting transparency and collaboration between students and administration, promoting not simply diversity, but inclusivity, and reducing financial stress.
Hi everyone, my name is Abuli Kesba and I'm running for board. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm majoring in neuroscience and psychology with minors in gender, sexuality, women's studies, and chemistry. And I'm a very student activities centered candidate. Student activities are at the heart of the campus. Without student activities, the Pitt experience would be very different. So I want to provide each and every student group here with the resources they need to pursue their diverse missions.
Hi everyone, my name is Matt Moore. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a sophomore majoring in politics and philosophy with minors in economics and in public service. And on the bright side slate, I'm running for student government board with the goals of helping to uplift Greek life on campus and helping to uplift civic engagement year round on campus.
Hi guys, my name is Nikita, she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a sophomore majoring in history and political science with a minor in studio arts. My main 3 focuses are increasing diversity in academic resources, preventative mental health workshops, and focusing on legal transparency. With that being said, I'll hand it back to Tyler.
Yeah, hopefully in the end, you can work with us to look to the bright side. And you'll hear more from me a little bit later on.
All right, thank you, bright side. Now let's hear from our last slate of candidates, Elevate.
Hi guys, so in the interest of time, I'm just going to be introducing our whole slate. So my name is Ryan Murphy and I'm running for a board position within the Student Government Board on the Elevate slate along with Danielle Floyd and Caroline Goodwin. We chose the name Elevate because our primary goal for next year is to elevate every student's college experience through focusing on mental health, diversity, and engagement. If elected, Danielle will advocate for more inclusive and accessible mental health care, create a space where underrepresented students can engage in meaningful conversations, and provide support for survivors of sexual assault. I will work to expand on the efforts of the Pitt Votes Initiative to increase student participation in elections, as well as strengthen the relationship between students and Oakland residents. Caroline will work to increase student engagement, particularly among upperclassmen and transfer students, while also advocating for the university to maintain aspects of Flex at Pitt in the future. These initiatives of ours are meaningful and realistic, as we all have SGB experience that has prepared us for this role. I currently serve as chair of the CGR committee, Danielle is chair of the wellness committee, and Caroline is a former SGB allocations committee member. With all this in mind, we hope you consider voting Elevate on March 2nd so that we can make these goals a reality for next year. And in the meantime, please follow our Instagram at elevate.sgb to learn more about our campaign. And as always, feel free to reach out to us via DM with any input or questions. And that's everything from us. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, Elevate, and thank you to all the candidates and slates. We're going to now call up the presidential candidates, so that includes Harshitha, Joe of the Vision slate, and then Tyler of the Brightside slate. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to speak their opening statement. After the opening statements have concluded, we'll start the actual debate part. A question will be posed to each of the candidates, and we'll rotate the order in which they can answer. Each candidate, again, will have 90 seconds to answer the question. If a candidate would like to respond to another candidate's statement, they're permitted to ask to speak for 30 seconds in total, following the conclusion of all the candidates' responses. So let's start with opening statements. We'll start with Joe Landstill.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Landstill. I've been an RA here on campus for the past 2 years, listening to and learning from a diverse group of students. I've also helped organize a charity on campus where we have fundraised tens of thousands of dollars to help build schools in impoverished places around the world. Now I'm running for student government president in order to address a number of recurring issues on campus. One big theme of our campaign is that we want to make SGB a much more approachable place so that it can work with student groups and address these concerns. This past year, a survey was conducted of club presidents on campus, and of over 65 club presidents, over 90% of them said that they did not feel comfortable approaching SGB with their concerns. If over 90% of club presidents do not feel comfortable approaching SGB with their concerns, then how do you think regular students feel? And if regular students don't feel comfortable going to SGB, then SGB cannot do its job as the voice of the students. Listen, on our slate, we have been running a listening campaign. We've been doing short pitches to clubs, but we want to have conversations with people and really hear from them. Every concern that we've heard, every idea for an initiative that we've heard, we have written it down, put it on a sticky note, and we have put it up on our wall. And we have a physical wall covered of Dan's apartment of different concerns that we have heard on campus. And as elected leaders, it will be our job to go through each and every one of those concerns, to hear the concerns of the students and address them.
Thank you, Joe. We're going to go on to Hashita Ramanan.
Hi, everyone. So much like Joe said, I'm also an RA, and in addition to being a part of RSA, I am the Vice President of Programming. This means not only do I program, but I also do a lot of other work, working with like smaller organizations in school, whether it be pit dining and like different task forces. So this has also given me a great insight into the student voice and what students really want to be done. Again, echoing what Joe said, there seems to be a disconnect between SGB and a lot of organizations on school, and all the clubs that we already have pre-existing have a lot of members. This means that we just need to find a way to connect with them, give them a platform to speak to us, and make them more comfortable coming to us with their concerns, and also their ideas on how we can approach problems. I think the outsider voice is very important in order to tackle some of these common goals we have, such as reducing tuition. I also hope to create transparency between the faculty and students here on campus. As you can see that the Flex at Pitt program has definitely escalated a little bit in terms of, are professors really following what they should be doing, or are they sort of stepping aside and doing what works for them more so than listening to the student voice? In order to do this, I would like to create a platform where, again, faculty is connected with students and they really are held accountable to the words that they say. Thank you.
Thank you, Harshitha. Now we're going to go on to Tyler Viljasti.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Ben and Darren, for hosting this awesome event tonight. Like I said before, my name is Tyler. I'm super excited to be here. I'm involved in Greek life on campus. I'm a brother Beta Theta Pi. I'm in Phi Phi Delta, the pre-law frat. But honestly, I'm most excited about my time that I've spent in Student Government Board. I was a member of the first year council my freshman year. Last year, I served as chair of the Community and Governmental Relations Committee, and I currently serve as vice president and chief of cabinet. And I've been extensively involved in Student Government Board in my time at Pitt, which I believe makes me uniquely qualified for great success as president. In these uncertain times, I believe now is the time to look to candidates with the most experience and expertise. You should be looking to people who you trust, who have proven track records in student government, and know what to do and who to talk to, such they will get to work for you on day one. The presidential position is in charge of day-to-day operations of the student government, and so strong student government board experience is incredibly important. And I hope to use my experience and expertise to fulfill my campaign platform and actually institute real and achievable change on campus. I can also confidently say that our slate is the only slate that can say that they've really been listening to students' needs for 3 years. And the slate in our slate could fill up essentially 30 walls with student feedback. We didn't just start listening to students because of this year's campaign. We've been actively doing it our entire time at Pitt, including myself when I ran for last year for a board position and currently as Vice President and Chief of Cabinet, but also when my time at the Community and Governmental Relations Committee and on the First Year Council. I've made a lot of efforts and initiatives to expand accessibility in student government, and I look forward to expanding on those a little bit later in my speech. And I'm looking forward to hopefully representing the student body next year as your president.
All right, thank you, Tyler. We're now going to go to our questions. First question is, access to mental health resources is challenging for Pitt students, especially now in the midst of pandemic. So what are your plans to increase the accessibility and availability of mental health resources on campus? We'll start with Rashitha.
Yeah, so this is one of my biggest initiatives. I definitely want to focus on like emergency resources. This would be one of them. I think that the reason students are struggling to like reach out to the correct departments is because we aren't really necessarily doing a good job at the moment advertising them, because a lot of things get buried under emails, or like our website is super extensive because we have so much happening, and that's awesome. But I think we need to break it down into like smaller places that they can go in order to reach out to like the correct people. So my proposition to fix this essentially would be, we already have mental health resources set up. We have the faculty to do that, but I think we wouldn't possibly need like a separate website. And then again, like RAs are already trained for this, but sometimes students don't want to necessarily approach them. So I propose creating a student-run helpline that is sort of blind on both sides, so you don't know who you're talking to, and the person that is talking to you doesn't know you either. That way you can talk to an anonymous student and you can like sort of get a feel for what's there, and if you feel comfortable proceeding. And I think this will definitely really help students reach out to the proper resources that they need. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Before we move on, I just want to say that if a candidate wants to respond to something said directly, you can do it just as soon as the person is done talking. You don't need me to prompt you or anything. All right, let's go to Tyler.
Thank you so much. Yeah, mental health is something that's super incredibly important, especially during the pandemic. And I know myself, I've suffered through a lot of mental health stresses. It can be really hard to get through classes, things like that. And so my mental health platform is very broad and expansive. And, you know, I can really look to some of my amazing board candidates as well for some of their incredible ideas and initiatives, including Nikita, who's running on a platform of mental health herself and trying to come up with more preventative mental health workshops, creating more accessibility for mental health resources on campus as well. But in terms of actual tangible objectives, I'm looking forward to working with the Wellness Committee Chair, Danielle Floyd, who's currently running for a board position this year. But I've already been, you know, serving in my capacity as Vice President and Chief of Cabinet, helping to oversee a lot of those amazing initiatives that are already coming out to make mental health resources more accessible. I believe one of the best ways to achieve that is to not necessarily promote the resources that currently exist, but institute new ways for students to engage with those resources, because I think there's a lot of stigma, especially going to counseling centers or calling some of those peer support hotlines that Harshita is talking about, where you don't necessarily know that person. I think we need to make mental health a lot more approachable to students. And I think one of those best ways to do it is through mental health liaisons and student organizations. I think a lot of students find homes in their student organizations on campus, and instituting formal positions within student organizations that are source affiliated, that are mental health liaisons who have gone through mental health training, who can serve as those first responders and those individuals that people can turn to in their trusted clubs and organizations, I think is one of the best ways to promote mental health on campus. I also have some other ideas, but that's sort of all the time I have.
All right, thank you. Joe, up to you.
Yeah, you know, I was actually just talking with one of my residents about this earlier this week, and they came to me and they told me they reached out to the counseling center this past week to try and set up a meeting with them. counseling center was booked for 2 weeks. They wouldn't be able to set up a meeting. So what did the counseling center do though? They sent them a list of 15 phone numbers of therapists to call. They start going down the list, calling them. Nobody's picking up. That's a failed response in the face of the pandemic. Everybody should be able to set up a meeting with somebody to talk to when they need to. We need to provide more resources to the counseling center. We also need to make sure that the counseling center has a more diverse staff, both in terms of racially and in terms of sexual orientation, so that everybody has somebody that they can talk to. Another issue that we have seen that feels relevant because it happened just this past week was the mental health day. That mental health day is a mental health day only in name, so-called mental health day. I talk to different students, they tell me, what are you doing on that mental health day? I'm studying for my chemistry exam on Wednesday. We need to make sure that we provide direction to professors to work these kinds of details into their syllabi so everybody knows early on in the semester what work will be there and that nothing will be due that week.
If I could just respond really quick, I think that's really great. And I think a lot of the things that Joe are talking about are really awesome. I will say Student Government Board has already been doing that. We have been reaching out to professors and things to make sure that that's happening. And so I will also say that we are working on making sure that mental health days, in my capacity as Vice President, Chief of Cabinet, we've been having these discussions. We're making sure that mental health days in the fall are not going to be falling on those days where it's hard to collaborate. And then also, or for students to actually have those breaks. And also in my time as the LGBTQA+ task force chair, we're proposing a series of recommendations already where we will be helping to implement more diverse people, faculty and staff in the counseling center.
Yeah, Tyler, I think that's great. I commend the work that has already been done on this issue, particularly regarding providing training to professors. The problem that I have heard from students over the past few weeks is that work, while it's good progress, it has not been realized in the student experience yet. So we need to continue to pressure the administration to make progress on this issue.
Sorry. Also to add to that, I think that, again, like we already have these existing platforms and we can keep adding new things. I don't think that's going to take us super far. I think that actually putting in more money and more resources, like you said, Joe and Tyler, to hire more people, hire more diverse people at more different times of day would definitely help get our students the resources that they need. Thank you.
All right, we're going to keep responses at 1 per candidate. For the next question and for the following questions that we have, if you'd like to respond to a statement, please use the raise hand function, and then Benjamin or I will call on you and then we'll address your response. We're going to move on to the second question for today. Arshitha and Joe, you're both not currently serving in SGB roles. How do you think your perspective as an outsider will influence your plans as president? And then we're going to kind of shift over to Tyler. Tyler, you're currently a board member. Why do you think your prior board experience is needed for president? We'll start with Hashita.
I think that even though I'm not a part of SGB, doesn't mean that we don't actually, as Resident Student Association, work closely with the organization. So we have a lot of parallels in what we do, and I think that makes me uniquely qualified because I have an outsider view. So I still have a lot of residents who make up a large part of the student population coming to me and telling me, hey, like, this isn't like working out, like, how can we make this better? And we're actively working to make those things better too. And I think like SGB has their set of rules and the way they do things, and then RSA has their like new, their own set of rules and their own unique ways of approaching problems. I think like coming in as an outsider makes me a unique candidate because I have now new ways to approach things and new ways to solve things, and I've heard new ideas versus someone who may already be in SGB who's been doing it for a long time and hasn't maybe like spoken to like other big organizations and listen to like different voices.
All right, thank you, Arshitha. We're going to move on to Joe.
Yeah, you know, I've been in RA for the past 2 years on the ground, listening to their concerns every single day, whether that's an international student or transfer student who's struggling to find a sense of community at this university, or one of my freshman residents this year who, like I said, cannot set up a meeting with the counseling center. I want to bring that student-centered approach to SGB. I want to focus every decision I make based on data and concerns that I hear from the student body, and I want to bring that. In terms of my outside perspective, I think it will make me a little bit more open to change in terms of whether it's restructuring public meetings to actually include public debate or other areas of SGB. I'm very open to that. I also really do want to point out that I completely reject this idea that you need to have served some threshold amount of time in SGB in order to run from these positions. We really need to emphasize that SGB is open to all students. It needs to be the voice of all students, and we need to bring more outside voices into the room, because when there's a diversity of opinions in the room, everyone is better off.
And Tyler.
I will say that I think, Harshitha and Joe are qualified in their own ways, but I think that I bring the unique experience that's actually going to allow us to make real progress in terms of the SGB presidency. I want to address a couple things. I think that this whole idea of diversity of perspective coming from a non-SGB experience is non-unique to SGB outsidership. I think it's unfair for you to suggest that I would not have my own diversity or own unique experiences being in student government board. I don't think SGB outsidership grants you that uniqueness of a different perspective. And honestly, I think being in student government board is one of the best ways to be able to understand its flaws and be able to work on ways to actually improve the organization. And so I intend to do so through a variety of ways. And I've already been doing so. I've already been working to democratize SGB leadership and bring in more student voices to the student leader database, of which we already have 100+ students who aren't involved in SGB whatsoever across student groups, where we already pointed them to positions and shared governance positions, because we know that that diversity of voices is important. But that's not to say that, the presidency is not just a position that you run for because you want to put it on your resume. You have to know how student government board works, because the president is essentially the CEO of the student government. You have to understand the day-to-day operations. You have to understand how allocations works. And I think having that perspective, being in student government before, also allows you to come to the student body with real tangible initiatives that you're going to be able to achieve, not things that you're going to promise simply for the sake of trying to get votes, but things that that you're actually going to be able to accomplish in their presidency. And so I think having that experience for presidency is incredibly important. And I don't think that it's, diversity perspective is non-unique to SGB outsidership.
All right, thank you, Tyler. So we're going to save some time for responses. I can't tell you who put their hand up first, so I'm just going to kind of guess at this point. Harshitha, do you want to respond to that?
Actually, I think Joe put his hand up first, so I'm going to let him
Well, I
speak.
appreciate your honesty. We'll go on to Joe. Joe, would you like to respond first?
Sure, I'll respond first. Yeah, I did spend a full year in SGB on the Community Government Relations Committee and on the first year council. I'm well aware of how SGB works, and I'm absolutely confident that I would be capable of fulfilling the role of president. I also do think that leadership experience comes in many forms, and to suggest that one form might be qualify you for this position any more than other forms, I think that's arrogant. It's simply not true.
Thank you, Joe. On to Harshitha.
I agree. Echoing what Joe said, I think me and Joe are both student leaders now. I think student government board, there's different sorts of governments on campus, like RSA's government, or being an RA is its own kind of government. And I think we hear as many student voices as you do, but just on a different platform. So I think it's definitely a little unfair to say like you're more prepared for the role than we are, because we've been doing government stuff our whole time at Pitt as well.
All right, thank you. Tyler, you'll be our last response on this question, and we'll move on to Benjamin's question.
Honestly, I find it incredibly rude to say that it's like arrogant to come from this perspective that, being in student government board makes you, you don't have that unique qualification, right? I think that having worked on initiatives, having seen things through to fruition, having done incredible benchmarking and incredible work and actually making real change does in fact make me qualified. And in fact, being aware how student government board works allows me to understand things like the activities fee, and to know that we can't just simply get rid of the activities fee. We can't run on getting rid of the activities fee, because over 66% of it goes to fund organizations like Pitt Serves, the Pitt News, WPTS, things like that.
All right, thank you, candidates. Let's go to this next question. This pandemic has changed virtually every aspect of life at Pitt. What are some things that have been implemented during the pandemic that you think should remain afterwards? Or what are problems that arose during the pandemic that still need to be fixed? And what are your plans to address them? Joe, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to, after the election, if I'm in office, I would want to collect a lot of data from the student body to see what works for students and what doesn't work for students. I know that a lot of my residents have been struggling with their mental health during the pandemic, having to stay in their rooms. So I would think going back to normal largely is a good idea, but we can talk about to what extent that's the case in different areas. I would want to have a student-centered approach to that. I would want to reach out to student groups all across campus, collect as much data as we can to figure out what the most appropriate response is, what we should keep and what we shouldn't keep.
All right, if you don't have anything else, we'll go to Arshitha.
Yeah, again, echoing what Joe said, I think it's very important to get student feedback. But I also think Flex at Pitt has its pros and cons. One of the pros is recorded lectures. Now you can view it at any time. And like, if you're sick, it's fine. You can like take that nap. If you're tired, you can just like go watch Netflix for an hour and then come back to your lecture and it's no problem. But on the other hand, a lot of teachers, I think, are freaking out due to other aspects and are instead making things more rigid instead of making things more flexible. And I think that definitely needs to be addressed because that's a really big con. And again, like this just goes back to like one of my initiatives of making sure that professors are held accountable of what they actually should be doing, and they shouldn't be taking advantage of the pandemic, assigning more work, being unreasonable about when to take quizzes or tests, because if you're time zones away, it's not reasonable for maybe you to wake up at 8 a.m. Eastern time, because that could be 2 a.m. for you, and your brain is simply not functioning at that point. So that's definitely, I mean, we're all here as students. That's like our primary concern. Our grades are pretty important to us because, hey, like we're paying a lot of money to be here. But again, I do think that doing a little more research on like exactly what students want is very important. But this is definitely, I think, a primary concern that needs to be addressed. And again, post-pandemic, I would still like to keep Flex at Pitt, but keep growing it so we still have recorded lectures. So if you do have to take a sick day for whatever reason, you are not just simply missing out on hours of lecture. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Hashita. Now let's hear from Tyler.
I think, before I answer this question, I think this is another point, why experience is good, right? Being a member of the board, I have data already through Fix It Pitt and through the proactive outreach that I've been doing in my capacity as Vice President and Chief of Cabinet. And so I already have an idea of what students' wants and needs are. And I've already been engaging with senior leadership on fixing some of these issues, like I said, the mental health days already. But I'll go into some good things first. I think Flex at Pitt, parts of it are definitely good. I think the accessibility and asynchronous nature of some of the lectures make it easier for students who have really busy workloads, internships, things like that, who may not always be able to make classes. I think we should keep some of that. I also think that this is going to reframe the narrative on health and safety on campus. And I think moving forward, I think we're just going to be a lot safer and more cautious as a student body to make sure that we're not spreading harmful contagions or germs. In terms of some bad, I don't think we've done a really good job on mental health. And I think that this pandemic has exacerbated some of the flaws that currently exist within the counseling system. And obviously that's some of the things I want to change with my mental health initiatives. I think tuition and fees are another conversation we have to have, especially during a pandemic when the quality of virtual education is not the same as in person. I also think that we need to ensure, one of the bad things is that ensuring professors are held accountable to making sure that they're not overburdening students, especially in these really incredible and difficult trying times. And lastly, I think we need to address meal plan prices. I think COVID has exacerbated the problem that students, especially freshman students, face with paying over $2,000 for meal plans. And in my conversations with Pitt Dining that I've been having, they've said that meal swipes and dining dollars on usage has been up since regular years. And so I really want to address those things. I want to make sure that meal plans are affordable and accessible moving forward. And I think the pandemic has really exacerbated those things.
All right, thank you, Tyler. Arshitha, you have a response?
Addressing what Tyler said about already having like data on this, I think that's absolutely perfect. Again, I think it goes back to show that, like, I'm not saying that in any way you're not qualified or anything like that, but I think like we can always take that data from you and we can ask more students and like promote it again in more like a variety of ways so we can get even more student answers, because oftentimes if you send out a survey in emails, they can just get deleted. It's just one click of a button. So I think it's very important to also acknowledge the fact that we can utilize this data and also go on to collect even more data.
All right, thank you. Tyler, you have a response?
Yeah, but I think that's also not to devalue the experience that I have already having worked in seeing initiatives to fruition, number one. Number two, I also have the experience of already talking to the people that I know I need to speak to in order to make change happen. I know who and when to set up meetings and who with to ensure that we are actually adequately addressing these issues. And third, I'm not going to be spending a couple months trying to figure out the structural organization of Student Government Board. I'm going to be able to get to work day one. I'm going to be able to start addressing these issues day one. And I think that makes me, in part, uniquely qualified because of such experience.
All right, thank you. Joe, you have your hand up?
Yeah, well, first I want to echo what Harshita said. Anybody who gets elected will have access to Fix It Pitt data, so I'm not sure what that point is about. Another thing, you want to talk about making connections in the administration, taking a couple months. Well, for one thing, the president-elect period is 2 months long. So if I conceded to you that you were right, that I did not have sufficient connections in the administration to make progress, I would spend that entire time working with the incumbent student government board, and the administration to make those connections, figure out what progress has already been made and how we can best move forward. So that's something we're all totally capable of doing.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question. I can see in the Q&A section that attendees are adding some questions, so I'd like to remind attendees that you are welcome to use the Q&A function to place questions, which we will reserve for the very end of the debate. We're going to go on to the next question. Candidates, approximately 1 year ago today, the Fossil Free Pit Coalition and other supporters occupied the Cathedral of Learning to urge the University of Pittsburgh to divest from fossil fuels. Tomorrow, Pitt's ad hoc committee on fossil fuels will meet to discuss its findings, which include a commitment for Pitt to be carbon neutral by the year 2037. What is your stance on this commitment? And as president, how will you address the growing concerns of students pushing for Pitt to divest? We'll begin with Arshitha.
I think becoming more eco-friendly is definitely very important, especially in the world that we live in right now. I'm sure all of you guys have paid attention to weather, whether it be here or Texas. We're not doing well as a planet. So I think that's definitely a very big concern, and I think it's very important. And I acknowledge the fact that we've already done so much in terms of just like having reusable boxes at dining halls and stuff like that. And I think now moving our energy focuses to something that's more renewable and reusable is definitely going to be beneficial in the long run, not only to our university in terms of finances, because we're eventually going to start seeing where we can actually save. So residence halls are eventually, I'm hoping that prices will be cut, because not using fossil fuels means that we're regenerating energy with what we already have. And I think there's a lot of benefits to it. I am not going to lie. I am not completely educated in this particular area, but I'm definitely willing to learn more.
All right, thank you. We'll hear from Tyler now.
Yeah, I just want to say I have been a strong advocate, and I definitely am in full support of the fossil free pit movement. And I think that some of the work of the report and the work of student leaders, there's a lot of issues that I want to bring up. The first is around transparency. Having read the report, I think it's absolutely unacceptable that the university has not published their work in divestment to this point. And I think it devalues a lot of the work that student leaders have put in at this point, because had they've, according to the report, they had been already divesting a little bit through that time, and they hadn't been mentioning that to students. And so I think that that's incredibly terrible. And one of my platforms is making sure and hold the university accountable to increasing that transparency. I think the second biggest issue here is that the university isn't listening to student voices. 91% of students in a resolution with the student government board elections a few years ago voted to divest completely from fossil fuels with the endowment. And I think it's absolutely unacceptable that the university has reneged on its moral obligation to address this issue moving forward. As president, I would not stand idly by and let the university continue to devalue the work of the incredible work of the fossil free pit movement, but also of the various environmental advocacy groups on campus that have been pushing for this change for a number of years. I think it's absolutely irresponsible that the university has not taken change and decided that they're going to wait for another 15 years to make change. This planet does not have another 14 years to have us wait and not divest from fossil fuels. And so as president, I will ensure, and having already worked and submitted a public comment on behalf of the board to the Board of Trustees, we're going to ensure, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that we are uplifting and empowering that movement.
Thank you, Tyler. That's going to be time. Joe, we're going to move on to your thoughts on the matter.
All right. Yeah, so during my time on campus and over the past 2.5 weeks of this campaign, I've been talking with the leadership of a number of different sustainability organizations, groups like Engineers for a Sustainable World, Epsilon Eta, Free the Planet, and the consensus is that they are not content with the progress that Pitt is trying to make on this issue. We need to move faster on it, and we need to continue to pressure the administration to divest now. How I would approach this issue is I would want to take a student-centered approach. I would want to work with these student leaders and students from all across campus to continue to pressure the administration and build a movement on campus to make sure that progress is being made in the immediate future.
Thank you, Joe. We'll save time for responses at this moment. Does anybody have any responses to the statements that were made? You can use the raise hand function. All right, Benjamin, we'll throw it on to you for the next question.
All right, thank you, Darren. This year, student organizations have struggled to recruit and retain a roster of members. Most organizations have also experienced difficulties in transitioning their typical club activities to online platforms. Should next year allow for more in-person engagement? And how will you, as president, help student organizations recover from this past year's struggles in recruitment and maintaining their usual operations? Tyler, let's start with you.
I think this is an excellent question, and I speak on behalf of Aboli as chairwoman of the allocations when I say that I completely agree that student organizations are the very heart of this campus. The activities, the amazing things that they put on, and I know Harshita's done amazing things in RSA, like putting on NAMO. RSA does a lot of really amazing events, and I want to say, right now as president, I will not remove the student activities fee because I truly do believe that student activities are the heart of campus, and I want to ensure that students moving forward have all of the financial abilities at their disposal with student government to make those things happen. That being said, I will also be, in firm support of student organizations moving to do things in person. I completely agree that Zoom fatigue is a super terrible thing. A lot of students are feeling disengaged. They feel like having to attend another Zoom event can be really difficult. And so I want to work within the health and safety guidelines that the university puts forward to ensure that students have that ability moving into the fall, as long as it's safe, to be able to do those student activities and things together. But I'm also really excited about the fact that I'm running alongside Aboli, who has 3 years of allocations experience, who's talked to literally all 500 student organizations essentially on campus, and who has concrete plans to make sure that we can combat some of the problems that student organizations are facing, including building collaborative networks, ensuring student organizations have mechanisms where they can work together and come together and work on events through collaborative grants, making sure that student organizations can lean on each other and each other's membership to ensure that their events are really getting the full participation and membership that they truly deserve. And I'm really excited to work with student organizations moving into the future to ensure that they have that ability.
All right, thank you, Tyler. Joe, let's go to your statement.
Yeah, I'd like to work my response in that because I have a couple of things to say, so I'm not sure how the logistics of that work. But anyway, since there's some confusion here with the activities fee, when we talk about lowering the cost of the activities fee, we talk about using the surplus from this year, a surplus that exists because many in-person events were not put on, Big Little Bash was not put on, conferences were not put on, we are running a huge surplus. So what I would support is using the surplus to fund student activities to minimize the cost that students are paying in the future. We could use the surplus to fund student activities in the future, and the purpose of cutting the activities to benefit the cutting the activities fee to benefit the financial wellness of the students is not to cut funding from any orgs. It is to use the surplus and make sure that we're not continuing to rack up a surplus and charging students more than they need to be charged when we have money in the docket. On the issue of orgs struggling with the pandemic and how that should change in the fall semester. I mean, look, we're going to have to wait and see where we're at in the fall semester. But yeah, we need to continue to listen to the concerns of the students and address these concerns line by line to make sure student organizations are able to continue to thrive and able to put on what they need to be successful. We need to listen to these orgs. We need to continue to reach out to them, hear their concerns. It's so important now more than ever that we're actively reaching out to these groups.
All right, thank you. Arshitha, let's hear from you now.
Yeah, I think this question is very transparent to me because, again, as Tyler said, I am the vice president of programming, so I throw these programs, and I'm an RA, so again, I throw programs, and I'm also president of a small club, so it's been very hard for me to not only recruit people for my club, but just have people show up to programs because Zoom fatigue is real. People are feeling very easily, people can get isolated very easily in this world because it's very easy to just show up to a meeting but totally have your camera off and not at all participate or sign off anytime just because you're not in person. That being said, coming from a health background, I think it's very important that safety is put first. So I do understand where CMRO is coming from. They've been put in place, put in charge of things for a reason. So yes, while I would like to slowly ease into the transition after being vaccinated, of course, into going back to in-person programming and in-person events, I think it is important to acknowledge the fact that our safety comes first. But that being said, I think it goes back into building a community. I think what the pandemic has shown us is there's a lack of community at Pitt, especially with freshmen or first-year students. Coming in, they have had no idea about how things work here. The rest of us have been fortunate enough to have seen things sorry, I can't speak right now, seeing things done in person. And I think that really throwing all our funds and resources into these organizations so they can outreach to students would be the best way to get going.
All right. If there are not any responses, I'll turn it back over to Derek.
All right, thank you. Candidates, because of COVID-19 restrictions such as social distancing and attending class from home, a considerable percentage of this year's freshmen have not received the full in-person on-campus experience at Pitt. And then additionally, next year, Pitt will welcome an entirely new class of Pitt students, many of which committed without an in-person tour of Pitt. How will you, as student government president, welcome and incorporate both classes of students that are new to life as an in-person Pitt student? We'll begin with Joe.
Yeah, I'm a RA in a freshman dorm, and all of my residents have missed out on a lot of fun experiences that I had as a freshman, whether it is events like the activities fair, being to go to that in person, go to different programming events that were put on during O Week. They did not get to experience any of it. So like I said in my last answer, we're going to have to see where we're at in the fall semester. If Pitt students are vaccinated, what I would like to see happen and what I would fight for is pushing back a lot of these events so they don't just happen during O Week, and the current sophomore class still gets to benefit from them this coming year, even though they did not get to benefit from them in the past, because it's so important that every Pitt student has that full Pitt experience.
Thank you, Joe. We're going to go on to Harshitha.
Yeah, I think Joe's absolutely right. It really does depend on the posture we're at in the fall semester. But that being said, if we are at a normal posture in the fall semester, the class of 2024 is going to have the same experience that we all here had. But the class of 2023, I think definitely is 2024 and 2025, it did miss out. So I think having a week for them, whether it be a week before classes or a little earlier than that, so I'm giving them an opportunity to go really explore campus, because I think a lot of them have had to be in their rooms because buildings aren't open. Just giving them the opportunity to go explore, but have different events appropriate to the fact that they've already completed their first year, I think could be very beneficial. In Res Life, we have living learning communities. I think sort of echoing something similar to that would be extremely beneficial, because after your first year, you sort of, for the most part, have an idea of where you want to go. And I think enforcing something like that for about a week would allow people to not only find their niche, maybe join a few more clubs, explore different buildings on campus, and actually meet people that were probably in their classes all semester, but they've never seen in person. I think this interaction would definitely be very helpful. But again, like Joe said, it definitely depends on what phase we are in terms of the COVID cycle.
All right, thank you. Tyler.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important as president to really recognize and understand the situation that current freshmen are in, but also some of the upperclassmen too, who have had a lot of their experience robbed in their time at Pitt. And so that's why I do have a plan for first year students, and I think it involves 3 prongs. The first is making student activities a lot more robust. And I think that means a lot of the things that I talked about before, working collaboratively and being proactive with student organization engagement to utilize the resources at the Student Government Board's proposal to use things like grants to make events even bigger, to bring in even more cool people, more cool speakers, more cool signature events, making Big O Bash even better, making sure that it's in line with health restrictions and such like that. I think the second prong for this is bringing out more swag and more gear for Pitt Pride. One of my fondest memories as a freshman is being able to go around to all the different free things and get a bunch of free t-shirts. I would go to the Pete and wear a different Pitt shirt every single time I went to work out, right? I think that students this year, especially freshman students, are significantly lacking on the physical things that bring Pitt pride to them and things that they can wear on campus to ensure, that they're really feeling as though they have a home at Pitt. And so I want to make sure that that's a big thing. But my third prong, and I think this is the most important, is listening directly to students. I think we need to make sure that the new student class is really intimately involved in this way. I plan on reaching out to new students who are going to be class of 2025. I've already been planning some cool things with the first year council, which is a 12-person first year cohort currently. I already have my ear to the ground. We already have some really cool ideas planned. And so I look forward to continue to engaging students in that regard moving forward.
Thank you, Tyler. Candidates, you now have the floor to respond to any of the statements that were made. Harshitha.
Yeah, I think like it's really important for the upcoming class to have that like space in person. And I do acknowledge the fact that you said a lot of them didn't get a chance to maybe tour campus or come here in person. I'm out of state, but I did happen to visit campus, but I do know like a lot of my friends out of state that I met at different socials did not actually tour campus. And we were the first year that actually did the Pick Connect online. So that being said, I'm actually not too worried about the incoming class because I do think there's a really good chance that COVID will just sort of drift away and we'll get a chance to go back in person. Oops, sorry, I didn't see that.
That's going to be time. Anybody else would like to respond? All right, Benjamin, back to you for the next question.
All right, thank you. One of the more important functions of Student Government Board is the allocation of the student activities fee. How would you ensure the allocation of the student activities fee is appropriately balanced among all groups? Arshitha, we'll start with you.
Awesome. Okay, so as Vice President of Programming for RSA, I've seen a lot of funds being denied left and right, and I'm not really sure why. I think if we are to keep the student activities fee intact and keep going with what we have right now, I think there needs to be more flexibility with the current rules. And again, COVID hit us and we didn't really know what was happening, but I feel like SGB currently has been very stringent with what they can and can't spend on. And I think if we are, again, to keep it, it would have to be going to students directly. Some of that money definitely just drifts away into nowhere, and I don't think it's giving back to students what they are paying for. That being said, I think there needs to be a closer examination of where everything is going. Like Tyler did say, it's going to other places such as Pitt News. But again, they have a set salary for their workers. So I think like having a list of like who's going to be working there and the anticipated amount of people joining Pitt News and stuff like that will definitely give us a bigger breakdown of like, hey, like this is what we need and this is what we should keep extra. But then we can definitely still cut fees if we're going to be in the virtual world, because if we're not going to be getting those allocations and those requests granted for different things like programming or throwing events for clubs, there's really no point in students paying that money if it's just, again, going to disappear into oblivion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now let's go to Tyler.
I think this is, really important, right? Because Student Government Board has a lot of responsibilities. Shared governance is one of them. Allocations is another one of those things. And, to Harshita's point, it is actually public knowledge, the fact that money is allocated to other places and how much money is allocated to other places. And so I'd encourage everyone to look that up themselves on their own time. But I think we have a manual for a reason, right? I think that, a 5-person club shouldn't be able to spend $50,000 on an event in the same way that ASA or BAS should be able to spend $50,000 on an event because it's going to be able to involve more people. And, having experience is incredibly important in this regard, because in normal years, we run out of money in the student activity fee. We simply don't have enough. And so having that experience and knowing that in a normal year, students use the entirety of the activity fee in the allocations process, I think is incredibly important, which is all the more reason why, if we're expecting a return to normalcy, we really shouldn't be cutting anything. And in fact, we should be returning to the same levels that we had in the past. But in terms of allocations, I want to make the process a lot more streamlined. And I'm really fortunate that I have the experience and expertise of a bully who's been in allocations for 3 years now on my slate. One of the things we want to work on is supporting student organization independence by allowing outside bank accounts and also allowing student organizations to sort of bypass source in ways which are currently being frustrating their student organizations from the ability to spend the money that they have earned themselves. And I also recognize that, there are a lot of problems with allocations. It can be really hard for student organizations with legitimate requests to navigate that process. And so I also want to make that more transparent by really making sure that the allocations committee is a lot more proactive in their outreach, and also working on things like collaborative grants where Student Government Board can proactively intervene and work with student organizations on the grant writing process to make sure that they get a yes.
All right, thank you, Tyler. We'll go to Joe, and then we'll hear from the responses.
Yeah, there's something I'd like to talk about with this, because when you talk about the allocations code, it has a lot of issues. And when I've been going around speaking to a lot of diversity organizations on campus, one thing that we have found is that the allocations code has systemic discrimination built into it. Let me give you a few examples of that. One, we've talked to a lot of LGBTQ orgs, and major events that they like to put on. A big popular one is community-based performance events. And to put on these events, you have to sponsor performers such as drag queens. However, they cannot get funding for their performances from SGB. So most of these events end up falling through, a lot of them. Another issue with that we have discovered is with cultural orgs. The major expense that cultural orgs has brought to us is they will spend money on cultural food for events specifically tailored to cultural food. However, this food is expensive and it's the primary expense of many of these events. They have to go to outside vendors to get this funding. However, getting funding from outside vendors can be more expensive, and the allocations code only allows for $3 per person to be spent on food. That is not enough to put on these events, so they have given up trying to go to SGB for their funding. I think that's shameful. What they have done instead is go to different ethnic grocery stores to buy cultural snacks. So what I would order is a complete review of the allocations manual by the Diversity and Inclusions Committee to help deal with these issues of systemic discrimination.
All right, thank you, Joe. Now we'll hear from some responses. Harshitha, you're up first.
Yeah, to add to what Joe said, I think also that the allocations fund does need to be reviewed about like who can request what, and it also needs to be flexible, because if you're going to keep the rules the same for like 10 years in a row, that's not going to work. Like I said, we didn't expect the pandemic, but it happened. But if there's no flexibility, like you said, you're running a surplus this year, but that doesn't necessarily need to happen, because I'm sure there's tons of organizations who would be grateful to like have that money in order to not only attract more students, but also to throw programs that are useful.
Thank you. Tyler, you have a response?
Yes, to talk about the thing that Joe brought up in terms of cultural foods, I've actually put on events. I put on Immigrant Restaurant Speaker Series. It was a 4-day event. It was the entire week, and we were able to fund it with fully student government board allocations, because as long as the cultural food is the core part of the event, it can be done, and student organizations have done that before. So I would encourage anyone who has any questions about that to contact me. I have experience. It's not really something we deny. About systemic discrimination, it's most of the time it's not that we don't like the idea, it's just sometimes they don't know how to fill out the form correctly. And so I want to work with collaborative grants and proactive outreach to ensure that student organizations get that yes that they deserve, because those events are awesome.
Okay, thank you. Joe, you got a response?
Yeah, if it was true that the status quo was okay, then we wouldn't be finding as many diversity organizations having to go to student affairs and get outside collaborations grants for their funding, because they have been continually denied by SGB. This is part of, I'm outside of SGB, so whenever I hear these issues from diversity organizations, I don't explain to them why they're wrong. I listen to them, and I recognize that there's a need for change often in many of these cases.
All right, candidates, we're going to move on to the individual questions. So we'll have a specific question for each candidate. We'll then move on to the attendees questions. You might have noticed in the Q&A section, there are a lot of questions. Most likely we're going to get to a max of 3. We do have one pre-submitted question regarding diversity, and then we'll do closing statements at the very end. Individual questions, we'll begin with Arshitha. Arshitha, you've mentioned that you want to improve disability resources at Pitt. Can you explain more about any specific plans you have to improve disability resources on campus?
Yeah, I've been very grateful to have a lot of disability resources training through my RA role, and also I am a part of a club that focuses on like low vision. I think our school really lacks, especially like now that we're on Zoom world. If you can't see the PowerPoints because maybe you're colorblind and your professor uses a lot of colors to teach, that's not really working out. And I think like faculty need a little more training on that, and we do need to adapt to more like user-friendly resources for whether it be low vision, low hearing. And I think like Zoom is not necessarily the best platform for this. And I know that every school probably in the nation that has adapted to Zoom because it has been like the fastest growing platform, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right platform for us. That would be one of the ways I tackle things in terms of academics. But then moving on to just sort of like, hey, you sprained your ankle, how are you going to get up to Pete to get to your gym class? Or trees. I think like our school isn't easily accessible in terms of movement, especially if you're in like a wheelchair, and public transportation is often like hard to move around because they only come every half hour, which isn't really friendly if you're trying to make it to class or just like an activity that you're trying to get it to. And I think that's really important to address and make our campus a little more disability friendly. Yeah, those are just 2 things I'd like to work on, but again, I'm very partial to receiving student feedback and things you would like to see done.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Tyler. Tyler, a big issue that you have addressed previously is the lack of transparency from the administration to the student body. If elected president, how will you address this problem?
There's a lot of things that I want to address specifically, and I think a lot of it is holding the university accountable to publishing information that they have an obligation to publish. I think some of the biggest issues that face our campus are the fact that we just don't know the numbers, and so our advocacy, falls short. One of the things I talked about earlier was the fact that with the fossil-free divestment movement, the university was not being transparent with the current amount of money that they were investing in the endowment to fossil fuel and fossil fuel-related industries. And so I think ensuring that the university holding them accountable to those things is incredibly important. Another thing that's near and dear to my heart is holding the university accountable to actually publishing things that their dining provider is doing. The dining provider does not provide any public information currently because people simply aren't, asking the right questions. One of the conversations that I've been having recently with the director of student affairs is about, are we allowed to have these numbers publicized? And it's like, well, if you push hard enough, they might do it. And so one of the things that I'm going to do as president is ensure that we publish numbers on unused dining dollars and swipes so we can hold Sodexo and the Compass Group accountable specifically for profiting off the pandemic. And I don't think, they should continue to be able to charge students the egregious fees that they do for meal plans, and especially if a lot of it is being unused and is just going to line their pockets. Another really big thing I want to look into is actually holding the university accountable to publishing the amount of money in our tuition goes to fund the Pitt Police. I think it's incredibly reckless and irresponsible that the university forces students who are completely against the criminal justice process, with specifically policing, to pay some of their tuition dollars to funding an organization which they fundamentally oppose. And I think that it's on the obligation of the university, because it's a public institution, to tell the students where their money is going.
Thank you, Tyler. Joe, finally, this question. One of the big platforms you are running on is in regards to the allocations process through SGB. What are some specific things that you would do if elected president to improve the allocations process?
Yeah, so when we talk about the allocations process, one big thing I would like to change is I would like to completely restructure public meetings so that decisions regarding student funding allow for student debate from students all across campus, not just within SGB, because right now what we see taking place is many board members will debate these issues regarding allocations in a private meeting, then they'll go to board meeting, and then they'll superficially vote on the issue. There's no room to invite other students to come in, join in the discussion, and have a conversation about what is a good use of student funding, what isn't a good use of student funding. I'd also fully support publishing the allocations budget in full on SGB's website. I realize it's published in different Pitt News articles. Students should not have to go sifting through Pitt News articles to find out where their money is going. Every student deserves to know how their own money is being spent.
All right, thank you, Joe. Tyler, a really quick response, just for the sake of time, we want to move on to the audience questions.
I just want to say, and I want to commend the work of the amazing people in Student Government Board this year who have worked to make allocations a lot more transparent. And I've already addressed some of the issues that Joe said. If you go onto the Student Government Board website, you will be able to find in full list where the allocations money is going, how much money we've already allocated. And I want to thank the amazing work of a lot of our communications departments, specifically also Victoria Chua on the board, who's been working to make the Student Government Board website a lot more accessible and making sure that we're actually publishing all that information. So I really just want to take a moment and thank the current board for making sure that we are making the allocations process a lot more transparent, and I look forward to making it even more transparent moving forward.
Thank you, Tyler. Benjamin, we'll move on to the audience questions. There's a good bit of them.
All right, our first question is a pre-submitted question, and it is, as Pitt is a predominantly white institution, how are you going to ensure that students of color feel comfortable here at Pitt? Tyler, let's start with you.
I think this is an incredibly important point, and I think it's really important that I bring up one of my platform tenets, which is promoting diversity and inclusion. I think creating spaces where individuals feel comfortable at home on campus is incredibly important. And it's where I found some of my best and closest camaraderie is in finding spaces where I feel welcome and at home at Pitt, including in a bunch of LGBTQA+ organizations on campus. But I will say part of my platform is to work on implementing parts of the Black Senate demands which were not implemented, specifically looking into the ways that we can turn these the leftover money that's in the reserves into potentially endowing some scholarships that the Black Senate demands were not funded on behalf of the university. Another thing I'm really interested in looking into is revamping the 6th floor of the Union, potentially tapping into the reserves to be able to make that space where a lot of diverse cultural organizations call home, spend so much of their time, spend so much of their office hours, and communication and building those friendships and relationships with those students on campus, making that space a lot more accessible, a lot more open, a lot more inviting, and ensuring that each organization has a valid space at home on campus. And I think that leads me to one of my most proudest accomplishments as Vice President and Chief of Cabinet, which is the chair of the LGBTQIA+ task force. We put together a massive 40-something page proposal for an LGBTQIA+ center on campus, because I think this is something that the community has been asking for a number of years now. It is something that it is unacceptable that Pitt has not made a stance on, and I think it's incredibly important that we move that really tiny space that the Rainbow Alliance office has in the 6th floor and actually give LGBTQIA+ students the space that they deserve, a safe space that they can call home on campus.
All right, thank you, Taylor. Harshita, hear from you.
So as a student of color, I think this question is really interesting because I do acknowledge the fact that I am in a predominantly white school and maybe things are a little more catered to white students. And I do, there is actually a space in the WPU for different cultural organization heads. They have their own little student government. And I think it's a fantastic space. I've been there a couple of times. The people there are fantastic. But I think what lacks here is like the advertising of those events, because we have people from all walks of life on our campus, from beautiful cultures, but not many people know about this unless you are from like those like cultural backgrounds. And I think that really causes a segregation in our school, because it's almost like different groups are like intertwined and working together and are connected. And I think like that would definitely be a focus for me, like making sure those programs are highlighted. So like, you know, just because you are of one race, one color, one ethnicity does not mean that you can't go interact with those other students and work with them and learn more about their culture. And I think that's really the best way to prevent like intersectionalism from becoming a more predominant thing on our campus. And additionally, with the LGBTQIA+ community, I think, yes, sure, we can move them and give them a bigger space along with all the other groups on campus. But I don't think space is the important thing. I think it's the memories and like actually being able to like join those groups and being aware of those groups that matter more. Space is just like a quantifying thing. It's more of those like, you know, being able to feel at home that's more important. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Hashita. Joe, let's hear from you.
Yeah, so this is a very wide-ranging issue, so I want to talk about a few things. For one, it's very important. One goal that our slate has been working on is making sure that the counseling center does have that more diverse staff, so every student has somebody that they can talk to. Another issue that we have been hearing from groups across campus is to make sure that dance spaces and other spaces that diversity orgs need continue to be provided or are not suddenly taken away from them. I also, like I said earlier, I would want a complete review of the allocations manual to make sure that diversity orgs across campus are able to successfully secure the funding they need for putting on different events. I also, support fully making more spaces on campus for these students, things like the LGBTQ Center. I'm proud of the fact that my campaign manager initiated and started that process almost 2 years ago now.
All right, thank you. If we don't have any responses, we can go to our next live question. How do you plan to support and represent LGBTQ students? Arshitha, I'll start with you.
I think this goes back into my emphasis on like what we already have, because it's not about quantity. Again, it's not about, we can give them an entire building, but if students don't know that resource is available, it does absolutely nothing. I think that goes back to like, again, like not necessarily advertising, but finding avenues where we can be like, hey, like, did you know about this? Like training not only our professors and professional staff in residence halls, but just like letting more like organizations know, hey guys, like I know you're doing this, but like if you do have a student that seems to be interested in this, can you point them in this direction? I think word of mouth spreads a lot faster than maybe putting something on a website. So I think the best way to make sure LGBTQIA+ community members feel welcome here at Pitt is just like making sure they're aware of the resources that are there to help them, but also just like educating students in general about like, hey, like this is like what this stands for and this stands for, because I think like pronouns and stuff can easily be forgotten or misused, but like you just need to be like constantly thinking about those things. But oftentimes, like my high school did not use pronouns. That was something that was very foreign to me coming into college, and I think that might be a common experience for a lot of people. But just being like cognizant of that and making sure like you're getting that education before coming to campus would definitely improve things for like all communities, not just the LGBTQIA+ community.
All right, thank you, Hashitha. Joe, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I would want to push the administration to make sure trans students are treated equally in all respects, absolutely in public facilities. Whenever I was a freshman on my floor, there was a trans female who lived on a floor of all male students. They felt very uncomfortable living there. That's completely unacceptable. So we need to see reform. We need to see more progress on this issue. Like I said, I would also reform the allocations manual to make sure that different student groups get the funding they need to put on performance-based events.
All right. Tyler, let's hear your statement.
I think, I come with a lot of experience in this regard. And, to respond to Harshita, as someone who's been intimately involved in this space and as a member of the LGBTQIA+ community, quantity is not necessarily a word I would use to describe the amount of resources available to LGBTQIA+ students on campus. In fact, that's one of the reasons why this LGBTQIA+ task force that I founded last fall was created specifically to solve that issue. And so, like I said, I founded and I serve as chair of the LGBTQIA+ task force on campus. It is a 70+ member coalition comprised of faculty, staff, and students who are looking to advance LGBTQIA+ resources on campus. I've been working extensively, putting in almost 10 hours a week since the start of last semester on top of my classwork, making sure that we're coming up with a comprehensive and full proposal to ensure that LGBTQIA+ persons at Pitt have a space. This includes counseling center reform, making sure that we have adequate staffing that meets the needs of LGBTQIA+ persons, and not simply having something that's called all except the kitchen sink. Like, that's completely devalues the experience of a lot of LGBTQIA+ persons. It also means reforming student health services for trans peers who were denied student health at the beginning of the COVID pandemic in the fall because of specific guidelines that were instituted by the new director of student health services. It also means instituting new staff positions in ODEI and in student affairs, supporting faculty and staff as well, who often serve as uncompensated mentors and quasi-counselors for LGBTQIA+ students in need, revamping the allies training to not be triggering, and including more gender-inclusive restrooms across campus. This is only the scratch of the surface, and I wish I had more time to talk about it, but I'm incredibly supportive, and as a member of the LGBTQIA+ community, I hope to continue advocating for them as president.
All right, thank you, Tyler. Harshita, I saw you have a response.
Yeah, I just want to say I completely agree with everything that Tyler said. I was just talking about maybe a building may not necessarily be necessary, but I do agree with throwing all the resources that we can to different departments to make them feel more welcome. And again, bathrooms was actually something that was very interesting because some of the schools I was considering just have co-ed bathrooms. There's no male or female bathroom separation. And I think that could be very easily adapted in our school, especially in the residence halls. So I think that could definitely be a movement that we can go forward to make them feel more comfortable.
All right, thank you. Joe, you had your hand up, but you put it down. Do you not have a response?
I'm okay.
Okay, Tyler, you get a response.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a physical center is absolutely needed, and it's been something that has been asked for students for a number of years now, if only to have a physical safe space on campus that is not literally a closet in the 6th floor of the Union, but to ensure that there is a physical space where students can go and feel safe and feel comfortable and actually have resources available 24 hours a day, as long as it's open, to ensure that these students have a space that they can call at home on campus. And so I don't think that not having a center is the way to go, and so I would push back on that, Harshita. I would say that we definitely do need a physical center on campus. It's something that the community has been asking for a long time now.
All right, and I think we have time for one last audience question. Here it is. As someone who has extensively read the allocations manual, I feel a lot of the discussions about allocations are not accurate. I ask, how are we supposed to trust the candidates to lead us when they have not researched this topic that they talk about incorrectly so often? Joe, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to respond when I'm not sure exactly what's being referred to, but I'll talk about a few different things here. One, I've heard these concerns, reoccurring concerns from students all across campus this year from diversity orgs, not able to get the funding they need. When I hear these concerns, when I hear that they have been continually denied information, that's not me being unresearched and not able to talk about the topics. That's me listening to the student body and hearing their concerns, and that's what I think is so important. I suspect this has been brought up a few times in the meeting that this person might be jabbing at the activities fee too. So let's be absolutely clear, because I'm happy to talk about this issue. The fact is that of the money that SGB allocates to student groups at the university throughout the year, they have allocated 7% of that money. Now, the remaining 2/3 of the budget that goes to formula groups, in some organizations are able to spend their money, many of them aren't. Things like Bigelow Bash we're not able to put on. So the fact is that there is a huge surplus in the activities fee. That is undeniable, and I would love to use that surplus to help fund student activities in the fall semester to save the financial bonus of the students and minimize costs that they would have to pay in the future. You can't deny that there is a surplus. That's what I would like to use it for. That's what I believe is the most logical response.
All right, thank you. Sure, if you know anything else to say. Tyler, let's hear from you.
Yeah, and I think, speaking from the slate that actually has someone who's been intimately involved in the allocations committee, I can say that all of my ideas and initiatives regarding allocations come directly from the source, someone who's been intimately involved with allocations in her entire time at Pitt. And so I can confidently say that all of the things that both Aboli and I are asking for are real and tangible things that can definitely be changed and have been as a result of numerous hours of research spent into thinking about how we can actually reform the allocations process. And so I think a lot of the concerns and things that a lot of other candidates have brought up have been addressed, and I've addressed them tonight because I want to make sure that we are fully transparent about that progress that has been made. And all of this is public information, right? The issues of lack of transparency have been addressed. All of that is on the Student Government Board website. You can easily visit it at sgb.pitt.edu. We do fully post the amount of student allocations and the student activity fee that we have allocated. And so I would, suggest that all the candidates, especially the board members, look into that on the website as well. And that, we have allocated more than 7% of the student activities fee already, actually in excess of $100,000 to student organizations. And we have a lot more money going into the budgets of student organizations as well. Also, the fact that there's not necessarily enough money in the surplus. We might have some money left over, but that money goes directly to the reserves. And so we'd have to work through the process of taking away potentially scholarships for the Black Senate demands, revamping the sixth floor in order to fund the activities fee in the fall. And that also means if we have a reduced activities fee in the fall, we won't be able to make those activities a lot more stronger and robust to make up for the lack of experiences that first-year students have had. And so I stand in firm negation of some of the suggestions that we get rid of the student activities fee or reduce it in any capacity, because I think it's not necessarily founded in the truth.
All right, thank you, Tyler. Arshitha, let's hear from you finally.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of what Tyler just said, and same with Joe. I think there's often a discrepancy between if you're very experienced and you're doing this and you're aware that you're doing this, and then student organizations. Having been on both sides of that page, I think it's very easy for student organizations to sort of look at things and be confused, but that just means that we have to listen to them and cater things more towards them, because yes, you might be making this document, and yes, everything might be making sense to you, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's echoed the other way. So I think I'm very grateful for everything Aboli and Tyler have accomplished this year. And I do think, as Joe is saying, it's very important to listen to student organizations, because it might just be a matter of revamping up forums or reorganizing the structure of what's being posted about what's being accomplished. So yeah, I think this question is incredibly important about where money is going, because of course that's a concern that does add to what you're paying to go to school here. But at the same time, I think yeah, it just needs to be a matter that's more looked into, and then after that, decisions can be made as we progress.
All right, thank you. I see, Joe, you have a response?
Yeah, I have many responses, but I'll try and keep it short. Okay, one, if I talk to a diversity org and they tell me directly they were denied funding for their cultural food event, what am I supposed to tell them? Am I supposed to tell them they were wrong? I'm sorry, SGB has actually already fixed this. No, that's not it. Many LGBTQ orgs, again, we talk about drag shows. Again, with the 7% number on SGB's website right now, it says they have allocated $63,000. They allocate $900,000 to student groups. I'm a math major. I also happen to have a calculator. Oh, you can't see because of the background here, but it's 7%. Lastly, I want to point out, I would still fully fund student activities. And how we could do this is if there is a gap, let's say hypothetically the surplus is not enough to cover the cost of student activities for the fall semester, I would charge minimal activities fee, make up for it. There's no cuts in funding.
Tyler, can we go to you?
Yes, thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak. Again, I agree. I would love to be able to fund every student organization, and I look forward to having those conversations with student groups, which I've been having in the LGBTQI+ task force, and addressing those systemic issues, which are obviously part of my plan to increase student organization independence, making sure that they have the access to the funds, making sure that they have that proactive engagement to make sure that they get a yes, because I want every student organization to get a yes from the student activities fee. And if the number that's on the front page of the website isn't valid, I would suggest going to the meeting notes and actually attending public meetings and actually getting a sense for what the allocations requests are being approved, and so we can all be, adequately informed candidates in this election.
Thank you, Tyler. Harshitha, let's hear from you finally.
I think it's also important to acknowledge that oftentimes when you're in those positions of leadership, it's easy to say, hey, I think this is what students want and allocating money there. So it's not really going to the students that are asking for it. I'm not saying that's what is happening. Obviously, I don't have the data of like that Tyler has of what students have requested in the past. But I think that it is important to acknowledge that sometimes they can, again, be a discrepancy. So I think we just need to open up communication lines more with clubs and hold a forum where they can really talk to SGB and say what they need and what they want so we can distinguish between the two.
All right. Thank you. Darren, I'll turn it over to you for the closing statements.
Okay, candidates, it is now 9:51 p.m. I'm sure all three of you would just like to go far into the night talking about everything Pitt, but we are going to save the rest of the time that we have for closing statements. I think the best way to kind of handle the questions that were asked in the Q&A that were not addressed is if I could ask each of the candidates to drop their email, their Pitt email, in the chat, and then that way, if somebody feels very inclined to reach out to you after the debate, it can be answered that way. If that is cool with everybody else. So we're going to go on to closing statements, and we're going to do 90 seconds per candidate, and then we're going to do reverse order from what we did with the opening statement. So we'll begin with Tyler. Tyler, your closing statement. You have 90 seconds.
I want to begin by, again, thanking Darren and Ben for hosting this amazing event. And I know sometimes these discussions can definitely get heated, but I think that heatedness shows that we're all passionate, right? Regardless of where we're coming from, regardless of the different organizations we've been involved with, and regardless of the differences in our platforms and initiatives, I can definitely say I'm very grateful for the fact that I'm running alongside Hashita and Joe. I think it's awesome to see that there's so many interested student leaders, especially this election cycle. I think it's one of the most competitive election cycles ever, or in recent history. I think Eric has continually said that. And so I'm really grateful and I'm really excited to have shared this platform with everyone tonight. I really do highly encourage everyone to reach out to me via email if you have any questions about any of my specific campaign initiatives, any comments, concerns. I would love to address them with you. I'd love to set up a Zoom call with you. And I think that's really, really important to be accessible as president. But I just want to reiterate, you know, I think in this time, in these uncertain times, you should really turn to the people that you trust, the people who have experience, who know what they're doing and can get to work for you on day one. And I can say that even as, you know, a president who would be working in the transition period for 2 months, you can still get stuff done. And that's what Eric did miraculously as president last year, and a lot of other presidents do. They get to started literally the day after election day and start having those meetings with the important administrators and things like that. And so I can't wait to be able to represent the student body, to be able to take the experiences, take the student needs that I've learned over the 3 years for the presidency, and work to better uplift and support everyone, and hopefully look to the bright side of this pandemic. Thanks.
Thank you, Tyler. Harshitha, 90 seconds for your closing statement.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening to us talk. I'm definitely grateful to be running beside Tyler and Joe. I think like this period of conversation has really, I think, pushed all of us to think deeper and more about what students want and what students ask of us. That being said, I think that experience in SGB, again, as iterated before, is not necessary because we all have different leadership experiences. And I think that can definitely contribute to who we are as leaders, having a little more diversity in there. And again, I think I'm a pretty unique candidate because I'm the only girl running for president here. And I'm also a person of color. So I think those things definitely make it important in terms of diversity. And again, that is another thing that adds to my uniqueness. And like you said, we definitely want to make this school a place that you want to be at. So I'm definitely open to hearing your ideas and suggestions and how you want to tackle problems, because I've seen a lot of students come to me, especially my residents, and be like, hey, like, I really don't like this, but here's what I would do instead. But just because they don't want to be in the spotlight does not mean I don't want to echo their ideas for them and be a voice for them. So again, as Tyler was saying, I think all of us have our emails in there. We'd all be very grateful to hear from you. Just shoot me an email, follow me on Instagram, DM me, whatever. I'm always open. I'm always happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Harshitha. We're going to move on to Joe. Joe, 90 seconds for your concluding statement.
Yeah, you know, this campaign over the past 2.5 weeks has been really an amazing experience. I've loved getting to talk to so many different students all across campus, so many different student leaders, learning about their concerns, hearing their concerns. You know, over the past 2 years, I've been an RA and I've tried to be the chief advocate of the students. I've heard their concerns. I really try and fight for them and make sure that everything I hear gets addressed. And that's what I want to be as SGB president. I want to be the chief advocate of the students. I want to take a student-centered approach to SGB, bring more student leaders into the room, bring more students into the room, hear their concerns, and address them, focus on solely addressing them throughout this. And that's why throughout this campaign, every time I hear a concern, every time we hear an initiative, we take a sticky note and we write down that concern and we put it up on our wall. And it's going to be our central goal throughout the year. And once we're elected, is to go through this wall and address every single one of those concerns and hopefully build on the wall, find out all the issues facing campus, really hear from students directly, bring that student-centered approach to SGB. So if you want to talk to me about any of this, if you have something that you want to add to the wall, anything, a concern, a complaint, an initiative idea, if you have a joke you want to tell me, I know I like jokes, so feel free to let me know, share that information with me so that we can have that conversation, because the only way I could be effective as SGB president is if I knew the concerns facing the student body. So thank you very much, and thanks again to the moderators.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you to all the presidential candidates, board candidates, and everyone who came out to watch the 2021 presidential debate tonight. We encourage all of you to vote on Tuesday, March 2nd at Pitt/SGB elections. I can't really read the URL here, but I'm sure they can drop it in the chat for you. If you want to learn more about each candidate, please visit our website at the SGB website in the chat, or reach out to the candidates directly on their emails. I got their emails on there or on Instagram, wherever you want to find them. Again, thanks for tuning in and have a great night.